Our reading this morning is from Matthew chapter 27, verses 45 to 56. From noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over the land. About 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Elio, Elio, lema sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of those standing heard this, they said, "He's calling Elijah." Immediately, one of them ran and got a sponge. He filled it with wine vinegar and put it on a staff and offered it to Jesus to drink. The rest said, "Now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to save him." And when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, the rocks split, and the tombs broke open. The bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tombs after Jesus' resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared to many people. When the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified and exclaimed, "Surely he was the child of God." Many women were there watching from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee to care for his needs. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons.
In this world there's a whole lot of trouble, baby. In this world there's a whole lot of pain. In this world there's a whole lot of trouble, but a whole lot of ground to gain. Why take when you should be given? Why watch as the world goes by? It's a hard enough life to be living. Why walk when you can fly? There's a whole lot of sorrow. In this world there's a whole lot of shame. In this world there's a whole lot of sorrow, but a whole lot of ground to gain. Why spend your whole life wishing, watching and wondering why? It's a long enough life to be living. Why walk when you can fly? The rest of the time you are given. Why walk when you can fly?
Good morning. Let's pray. Dear God, may you bless this fly that wants to help keep me awake and alert. And may you anoint our souls to be tuned into the frequency of your speaking, so that the words that Bob read to us that have been handed down from our faith ancestors would be alive and help us to become more alive ourselves in this time, in this place. That as we reflect on these words, that by the power of your Spirit, you would help us all become more human, more what you dream for us to be as a people. Oh God, may it be so. Amen. This summer, if you're visiting, we have been taking each Sunday and exploring different questions that are attributed to Jesus in the four Gospels. So each week has been a different question. And we have a question this week which we'll highlight. And after this Sunday, we'll do two more questions. One next week and then one on the 22nd of September, I believe. So that's sort of the plan. The question this morning, for me, is one of the most important. The question from the text in Matthew 27, I think it's verse 46, where Jesus is on the cross and cries out in a loud voice in Aramaic, Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani, which is translated as, my God, why have you forsaken me? So think about it. Jesus is at the moment in his life that he needs God the most. He's in horrific pain. He is suffering a brutal death. And in the midst of it all, he cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why? I've done everything you've wanted. And now when I need you most, where are you? This is a sobering question. So to put it in context, the death of Jesus for the early Christian writers was incredibly important. For example, the first gospel written chronologically, like in the decade of the 60s, not the 1960s, but the 60s, Mark wrote the gospel, and a third of the gospel was about the death of Jesus, what's called the Passion, that final week of Jesus' life. In fact, it's believed that was the very first thing Mark wrote and then filled in the rest around it. Matthew and Luke and their gospels, at least 25% of their gospels are about the death of Jesus. And John goes off the chart. The Gospel of John, nearly half of John's gospel is about the death of Jesus, the last week. So this is an incredibly important episode in the life of Jesus to the early Christians and to theological writers ever since. There is no shortage of theories and ideas. Why did Jesus die? Why did he have to die? Why is it so important? There are libraries filled with books of people that have studied this. And there are a number of theories about why Jesus died. And I would humbly suggest to us this morning that often our solutions to a question create greater difficulties than the original question in the first place. For example, one of the preeminent theories as to why Jesus had to die is what's called the atonement theory. And the atonement theory basically goes like this. Adam and Eve committed a horrible sin in the Garden of Eden. They so angered and annoyed God that God was really upset with all of humanity, and the only thing that could acquiesce God's severe anger at all of us was for God's Son to come and die. So it portrays God as this mean, angry ogre that is only appeased by the death of Jesus. And now because Jesus died on the cross, ollie ollie in free, we're all good, God's happy with us, and it's all okay. Well, for me, that creates a lot of problems. I don't know about you, and realize, look, I realize I'm giving you a very abridged and very skewed view of atonement theology, but at any rate, that's what it comes down to for me. So that's one theory. Then another theory has been posited by a man named Nicholas Thomas Wright, N.T. Wright, very, very famous Jesus theologian. I would suggest the most preeminent Jesus scholar of our lifetimes. Some of you have read Marcus Borg, the theologian. Marcus Borg said N.T. Wright is the most brilliant human being he had ever met. So N.T. Wright taught at, I believe, Oxford, and is just an incredible scholar. And he posits that Jesus was a prophet. Jesus understood himself to be a prophet. And N.T. Wright says, Jesus denounced as no better than the pagans, not only those who compromised with Caesar and the oppressive Romans that had control of the Jewish state at the time. He says Jesus denounced not only those who compromised with Caesar by playing his power games, but also those who compromised with him by thinking that to defeat him, they needed to use his own weapons. And Jesus said, those who take the sword will perish by the sword. Fighting the battle for the inbreaking of the realm of God, according to N.T. Wright, in Jesus' mind, with the enemy's weapons meant that you've already lost the battle in principle and would soon lose it, and lose it terribly in practice. And that's, in fact, what happened. The Romans absolutely destroyed the Jewish state in 66 AD. And what N.T. Wright is saying, Jesus was teaching you can't use your enemy's weapons to defeat your enemy, otherwise you just become your enemy. Think of Nietzsche, who later said, beware in slaying the dragon, you become the dragon. And so in this political season, I would just suggest if we use the same weapons as those we view as our enemies, we've already lost. No politics. All right. Thank you. Thank you. I stand corrected. Well, I just either side. I'm not picking a side. And he says that Jesus was determined, N.T. Wright says, Jesus was determined that it was his task and role, his vocation as Israel's representative, to lose the battle on Israel's behalf. That by losing, he would win. Trusting that Yahweh, God, would vindicate him. So as Jesus is hanging on the cross, all of his followers are dispersed. It looks like his whole life has meant nothing. He's going to die in obscurity, and it was all for naught. He's in horrific pain, unimaginable pain. And he's screaming out at the top of his lungs, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, my God, where are you? When I need you most, where are you? That is the question we get to look at this morning. So those are a couple of theories on Jesus' death. Here's one I read this week. I've told you many times I like to read Japanese koans, Buddhist Zen koans. And I'm reading this book, fabulous book called The Gateless Gate, written by a guy named Koan Yamada, who's a wonderful Roshi, explaining 48 of these different koans. And in my reading, Yamada says this. He says, we cannot attain true realization, to satori, to true actualization by proceeding step by step like we're going up a ladder. It's not you get better and you're better and then finally you're there. And he said, no. He says, we must take a leap as if we're jumping into the air from a high cliff with our hands attached to nothing, if you want to come to true realization. And so when I read that, I thought of Jesus on the cross, attached to nothing, felt nothing, in the middle of it all. Now, one of the things I love about this question and this text is that in this portrayal, Jesus is incredibly human. And it's one of the reasons I personally don't put much stock in what are called the Gnostic Gospels, the Gospel of Thomas and Mary Magdalene and Peter, the Gnostic Gospels that were found at a place called Nag Hammadi in the 1940s. Because in those Gospels, Jesus pretends to be human. He's really not human. He's like this supernatural being that puts on an earth suit and just walks around pretending to be human. But Matthew, Mark, and Luke particularly make it very clear Jesus was fully human. And I love that. So Jesus is on the cross in his greatest hour of need. And what I would suggest, many of these theories about why Jesus died, we miss the forest for the trees. We're looking for a big why. Why did this have to happen? Why? And for me, the more important question is how. How do we get through? Because I don't know about you, but I certainly have had experience in my life of feeling like a huge loser, knowing that I've hurt people's feelings, that I've done things I am ashamed of, that I have suffered, felt so alone, felt so afraid, and in my own darkness of despair cried out in my own heart, my God, why did this happen? Where are you? Why am I this way? I need you. Where are you? And I take great comfort in that Jesus knows what that feels like. Jesus has been there. As it says in the letter to the Hebrews in the New Testament, chapter 4, that we have a great high priest who knows what it is to feel alone and afraid and to feel God forsaken. He knows what that feels like. I take great comfort in that. And I look at how Jesus endured that. Because as the records state for us, this was not the last utterance from Jesus' lips. According to Luke, in his gospel, the last thing Jesus said before he died, in Luke 23, verse 46, Jesus called out with a loud voice, "Beloved, into your hands I commit my spirit." And with that, Jesus breathed his last. So here's how I understand all of this. In a moment of horrific pain, of desolation, of fear, of loneliness, the existential stuff that drives us all crazy, Jesus, his feelings, his relationship with God is numb. There's nothing. And he cries out, quoting Psalm 22. It's believed he was praying Psalm 22 as he was dying on the cross. And in Psalm 22, there is this line, my God, why have you forsaken me?" But that's not the last thing he said. I get the image. Jesus throws himself from the cross into midair, holding on to nothing, and says, "Beloved, I don't know where you are. I don't know if you are, but I trust you are there, and into your hands I commit my spirit." That's how to get through the fear that attacks us all. Look, here's the reality. We are coming up on a political season, and everybody's afraid. What's going to happen if so-and-so gets elected, if this person, that? My suspicion will be that this election will really solve nothing, and that after it's over, there will be many, many frightened people, upset and angry and protesting and screaming and yelling, and the fear will not go away. So we are heading into an unknown situation. Even in our own congregation, we're heading into a time of transition. We're about to get a new pastor. Probably, hopefully, by the first of the year, we'll have a new pastor to lead us into the future. It's a time of transition. We are assaulted thousands of times a day on the internet, on our phones, in the newspapers, in the TV. Be afraid, be afraid, be afraid, be afraid. And so how do we navigate that? And what I get from all of this is Jesus just says, into your hands, I'm going to leave it up to you. There's a wonderful Christian writer that I love, Corrie ten Boom. You may know her. She was a Danish lady. She and her sister hid Jews from the Nazis during World War II. They got caught, and she and her sister were sent to a concentration camp. They survived miraculously. It's a story you can read it. The Hiding Place, I think, is the name of it. There was a movie and a book. But Corrie ten Boom says, here's the deal. Never be afraid of going into an unknown future with a known God. So we are going into an unknown future. I don't know who's going to get elected. I don't know what will happen. I don't know who our new pastor will be. Have no clue. I have no idea what I will do with my life when the new year starts. Hopefully I'll find something to do that doesn't drive me as crazy as you people, but it's an unknown terror that awaits me and all of us. But we don't need to be afraid because we're going into an unknown future with a known God. The same God that has been with us in the last couple of years in the craziness of some grumpy old retired chaplain that showed up here, and we've experienced grace and love and acceptance in this place of all kinds of people. We have experienced connections we never dreamed of. That same God is going to be with us going into an unknown future. And so we don't need to be afraid. That's what I take from all of this. One of the great lines in the Hebrew Scriptures, the book of Job. I love the book of Job. And in Job 13:15 is the most incredible statement in the whole book. Job cries. Job has, his children have been murdered. Everything he owns has been stolen. His body is covered in boils. He is in such pain that he's sitting on a dump heap, scratching his skin with pottery shards, trying to alleviate his physical pain. His dear wife comes up to him, looks at him with scorn and says, "You are a loser. Why don't you just roll over and die?" And in the midst of it all, Job screams out, "Hinkatalani ye hello." God, even though you slay me, yet will I trust in you. And that's what I hear from Jesus at the cross in Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. Even though you slay me, I'm going to trust in you. I don't know how else to live. I don't know how else to navigate this. And for me, that is the message of this question, to get us through the next season of whatever's going to terrorize it, whatever's going to make us afraid, to trust that the one we call God will get us through and get us through together. Together. That is the antidote, I see, to going all Chicken Little. That the sky is falling, we're going to die. Don't go there. Because the one we call God is with us and will help us navigate and go through together. Together. That is my hope. I'm all in on that. I got all my chips in on that promise, that trust. May it be so. Amen.